I'll be reading Mark 1, 16 through 21. As Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. "Come follow me," Jesus said, "and I will send you out to fish for people." At once they left their nets and followed him. When he had gone a little farther, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John in a boat. Preparing their nets, without delay he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men and followed him. They went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, Jesus went into the synagogue and began to teach.
Good morning. We have been, of course, as you are all well aware, discussing the idea this year of being led by the Spirit. And a couple of times throughout the year, I've kind of addressed some thoughts about, well, if the Spirit is leading, then by necessity, we must be followers. And we know that as the Spirit leads, or as God leads through the Spirit, that the leading is going to be good. The leading is going to be appropriate. The leading is going to be exactly what we need. There can be no fault if we end up in the wrong place in life, or if we end up not where we thought we should be. There was no fault in the leading. If there is a problem, then the problem comes in the following. And so, as important as it is for us to understand the qualities of leadership, or the way that the Spirit leads, or how we are being led, and all of those things that we've talked about through the year, and those things are important, perhaps one thing that we really need to spend more time on is the idea of us being followers, of us doing the right kind of following, of us following for the right reasons, and following in the right way, and all of those things that are wrapped up in being the followers that we should be when it comes to our relationship with the Spirit as He leads us. And so that led me to consider some things about what Jesus said to His disciples as He called them to be followers of Him, and the way in which they responded to that call, the way that they did declare themselves to be followers of Him, and how we can learn from that, and what we can see about the way that we need to be followers as we continue this study that we have through the year on being led by the Spirit. As we move into through the month of September, and then the final quarter of the year, we will be dedicating to the study of prayer. And so over the next few weeks, we'll kind of, in a way, in a sense, be wrapping up some of the things that we've been doing as we kind of transition into what that means in our prayer lives. And so we'll be doing a dedicated study of prayer during our Bible classes on Sunday mornings, and then sermons to sort of supplement those and add to that the thoughts that are being expressed in the Sunday morning classes. So we will still be on the topic of the subject, or the topic of the Spirit, but really focused on the idea of prayer. So over the next couple of weeks, we'll kind of be transitioning into that study of prayer. And so that's what I had in mind this morning as I was thinking about what it means for us to be followers as we dedicate ourselves to being followers of Christ, followers of the Spirit, followers of the Father. Then we really need to be in that position in order to engage properly in our prayer lives, as we will be studying in the coming weeks. So let's kind of take a look at some of the things that Jesus, or some of the things that we can learn from this interaction that the disciples have with Jesus in Mark chapter 1. When it comes to being a follower, the first thing that we want to know is that there is a purpose to what we are called to. When when we are called to follow the Spirit or follow Christ or be led by the Spirit, there is a reason for that other than, He's God and He gets to say so. And we are the created and we have to do what He says. There's more to it than that. And we need to understand that there is a much larger purpose, that there is a much greater purpose to what Christ is calling us when He calls us to follow Him. Jesus tells His disciples, or the ones that He calls here in Mark chapter 1, He says, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." I have a plan for you that is greater than the plan that you have for yourselves. See, by the time that He called them, they had already entered into a profession. They were following in their father's footsteps to become fishermen, just like their father was, and there's nothing wrong with that. It was an honorable profession. It was a good thing to spend your life doing. But Jesus said, "I have more in store for you. I have greater plans for you than you have planned for yourselves." And so whatever it is that we have planned, when Christ calls us, He has a better plan, a bigger plan. He has a bigger idea of what it is that He wants us to do than anything that we might have imagined for ourselves or planned for ourselves. When I think of the idea of following, I always think of the kids' game, and I'm sure you all played it at some point when you were a kid, follow the leader. And the whole point of follow the leader is to do exactly what the leader of the line does in the way that the leader of the line does it. If they wave their arms in the air, you're supposed to wave your arms in the air just like they did. If they skip and jump, you're supposed to skip and jump. If they get down and crawl, you're supposed to get down and crawl just like they do. And we played that game as a kid, and it was fun to be the leader of the line, right? To try to get your friends to do silly things as they were following you, and then as you were one of the followers later on, to try to be able to do what your friend was doing as they were the line leader. That was fun. And so Christ calls us to follow Him, and really what He's calling us to do is to mimic what He does. As you see me doing something, as you see me leading you, I want you to follow me. I want you to do the things that I am doing. I want you to become the person that I am becoming. I want you to be the one that I am. And there's a couple of passages we can look at in the New Testament. Paul has this thought in several of his letters that he writes. In Philippians chapter 4, in verse 8, he has that verse where he talks about whatever is true, whatever is right, whatever is noble, whatever is honorable, whatever is of good report, if there's any virtue, if there's any praise. He talks about all these wonderful things. And then in verse 9, he says, "The things that you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things. And God, the God of peace, shall be with you." Paul says, you remember when I was with you in person? Remember when I was there and you saw me living my life a certain way? You live that way as well. Practice these things. Do those things that you saw me doing. But Paul wasn't vain about it. He wasn't bragging. He wasn't holding himself up as some kind of an icon or idol. Rather, in 1 Corinthians 11:1, he told the readers in Corinth, he said, "Be imitators of me, just as I also am of Christ." Paul said, I want you to do the things that I'm doing, but only because I'm doing the things that I saw Christ do. As I saw Christ do those things, I am patterning my life after Him. I am following His leadership, and I'm doing the things that He did. And so as you see me do those things, you do those things as well. And then he continued that thought again to the church in Ephesus in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 1. Paul says, "Therefore be imitators of God as beloved children." And every time I think of that verse, or every time I read that verse, I think of the child following in their father's footsteps, as I did with my dad when he'd walk through the deep snow out to the barn to do chores, and I'd try to match him step for step, and I'd try to put my feet exactly where his feet were at. Be imitators of God as beloved children. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to follow our leader. We're supposed to be like him in every aspect, just as much as we can. Jesus told His disciples in John 13, verse 24, in that upper room on the night of His betrayal, He said, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you, that you also love one another. And we spent a lot of time talking about love last year. And in that study of love, we talked about the new aspect of this commandment was they had been commanded to love. That was the central focus of the law, that they were supposed to love God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love their neighbor as themselves. That was the two things that the law and the prophets hung on. But Jesus said, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you. Christ came and he set the standard for what love is. He demonstrated what love is, and we are supposed to love as he loved. We're supposed to follow our leader. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15, Paul there wrote, but speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in all aspects into him who is the head, even Christ. Who is it that the child wants to grow up and be like? Wants to grow up and be like his dad. The daughter wants to grow up and be like her mom. They see that example. They see that pattern. They see that life that they want to live. And so the young child wants to grow up to be just like their father, just like their mother. And here Paul is saying we are to grow up in all aspects into him. We're supposed to grow up so that when people see us, they see Christ. We are to grow up into him. We are called for a purpose. Christ calls us to follow him so that we can become like him. The Spirit always leads us in the direction of righteousness, always leads us in the direction of becoming more and more like Jesus. We are called for a purpose. We see in the example that we read in Mark chapter 1 that there is also a pace at which we are expected to follow. You know, in the old follow the leader game, if the leader of the line took off running, it wasn't enough that you just went in the same direction. You were supposed to match them step for step. You were supposed to keep up with them if they took off running. And there is a pace at which we must follow our leader. In the story that we read in Mark chapter 1, when Peter and Andrew were called, immediately they left their nets and followed him. When James and John were called, immediately they left their nets and they followed him. There wasn't a waiting. There wasn't a waiting for a more appropriate or convenient time. There was simply going because they had been called by their master. Look at Luke chapter 9, beginning in verse 57. Luke 9, verse 57 says, as they were going along the road, someone said to him, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, the foxes have holes and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. And he said to another, follow me. But he said, permit me first to go and bury my father. But he said to him, allow the dead to bury their own dead, but as for you, go and proclaim everywhere the kingdom of God. And another also said, I will follow you, Lord, but first permit me to say goodbye to those at home. But Jesus said to him, no one, after putting his hand to the plow and looking back, is fit for the kingdom of God. We read through this section, and in some ways, to our modern ears, the response that Jesus gives to those who have declared that they will follow him sounds harsh, sounds almost disturbing. But in the day that Jesus lived, when a teacher called a student to follow them, the teacher was declaring, I see in you the ability to become like me. I see in you the qualities that are necessary of someone to become the type of person that I am, and so I will call you to follow me. And when a rabbi called someone to follow them, they expected that person to give up everything they had, to give up whatever plans they had, whatever lifestyle they had, whatever choices they were about to make for themselves. If that student wanted to become like the rabbi, they needed to leave it all behind. And so when Jesus calls them and they have reasons not to follow him immediately, I need to go and bury my father. Well, the reading there suggests that the father probably was not dead waiting to be buried, but they were declaring, I need to go and take care of my aging parent, and when the time is right, when I've fulfilled that responsibility, then I'll come and follow you. Jesus said, that's not what I'm calling you to do. I'm calling you to follow me now. And later when it says, let me just go say goodbye to those at home. Well, no, you need to be prepared to follow the Master now when he calls you. There is a pace at which we are expected to follow Christ, and it's the pace that he sets for us, not when it's most convenient for us, not when we think the timing is right. The timing is right when the Lord calls. Ecclesiastes 12, verse 1 says, remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw nigh, when you will say, I have no delight in them. You see, if we put off following the Lord now until it's more convenient later, the fact is, typically that more convenient time never comes. We find one excuse after the next, one excuse after the other, and eventually life is gone, time has run out, and we still haven't made that decision to follow the Lord. Choose to follow the Lord now when he calls, because there may not be another opportunity later. In Luke 19, we have the story of Zacchaeus, and you know the story. He was the wee little man, the short man that decided he wanted to see the Lord as he passed by, so he climbed up in the sycamore tree, and Jesus stopped and he said, Zacchaeus, come down, for I'm going to your house today. And in Luke 19:6, it says, he hurried and came down and received him gladly. Zacchaeus was ready to answer the call. When Jesus said, I'm coming to your house, Zacchaeus hurried to make it happen. I don't know what else Zacchaeus had planned that day. I don't know what other things he thought he was going to be doing after he got down out of that tree, but his plans changed when Jesus called him. And see, if our plans don't change when Jesus calls us, then we haven't really made him the master. When Jesus calls us, it changes everything, and we need to respond immediately. Ephesians 5, verses 15 and 16 says, therefore be careful how you walk, not as unwise men, but as wise, making the most of your time, because the days are evil. I like the old American Standard there says, redeeming the time, making the most of the time, redeeming it, bringing out all of the value that you can out of the time that you have, because the days are eating that time up. That's what it means when it says the days are evil. It says that the days, that time is passing, and we can't slow it down, we can't stop it, we can't keep time from going, and so we have to use that time as best we can. We use the time to the best when we answer the Lord's call and when we follow him at the pace that he sets for us. We see finally this morning that there is also a price that is associated with being the right kind of follower. There's a price. It says they left their nets and followed him. For James and John, they left their father behind and followed him. And I've always wondered about that, how their father felt about it. And I have to decide, I have to think that their father was proud of what they had done. That they knew who Jesus was, and that their father saw them going to follow this rabbi, this teacher, this master that was going to make them fishers of men, that was going to give to them a life that was of greater purpose and greater value than what he as their father could give them. But it cost these men something to follow Jesus. And as I think about what they left behind, and for these men, it says for both sets of them, they left their nets and they followed him. And what is a net for? Well, it's to catch prey. It's to catch, in their case, fish, but nets have been used to catch all kinds of animals, from fish to tigers to who knows what. And it got me thinking about when I was a kid, one of the television stations in Kansas City used to show after-school movies. And they'd do a John Wayne week every now and then. And John Wayne movies, one of my favorite, this was back in the days before VHS. Kids, VHS were these tapes that we had movies on back before compact disc. Well, you don't even know what those are. Back before you could watch them online. And way back before those things were invented, you just had to wait until the TV station decided they were going to show the movie you wanted to see. And one of my favorite John Wayne movies back then was Hatari. And it's the one where he lived in Africa and he went around and he caught animals to send back to the States to zoos. And so he was always catching animals. They were chasing animals down through the whole movie. Well, one scene, they have to catch a whole tree full of monkeys. And there's a whole bunch of monkeys up in this tree. What's a bunch of monkeys? Is like a gaggle or a herd? I don't know. But a whole bunch of monkeys up in this tree. And Pockets, the guy that invents all the ways of catching the animals, ties a rocket to a net. And they shoot this big net up over the tree. And they catch a whole tree full of monkeys using one net. What was I talking about? Nets. They left their nets behind. You see, nets are something that are designed, inherently designed to encumber something. How does a net work? A network is a real thing. How does a net, how is it used? Well, when the net encompasses something, when it covers something up, it limits its movement. It makes it so that it can't extend its legs or its arms, or the fish can't swim, or whatever it is that's caught up in the net gets stuck. And it just has to sit there until something comes along or someone comes along and gets it out of the net. You see, on one hand, they were leaving something behind. It was their nets that was valuable to them because it's how they made their livelihoods. It's how they earned a living. It was the basis of their profession. And yet, on the other hand, Jesus was calling them to leave something behind that was encumbering them, that was keeping them from becoming the person that He wanted them to be, that was keeping them from doing something that they needed to do on His behalf. Hebrews 12:1 says, "Let us lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us." People, lay aside your nets. Lay them down. Get rid of the things that are keeping you from following Christ. Whatever it is. Job, friends, family members, whatever it is that is keeping you from following Christ, it's become a net, it's become an encumbrance, it's become something that is keeping you from being the person that Jesus wants you to be. And we need to lay those things aside. Colossians chapter 3, verses 5 through 8, Paul lists there a whole bunch of things. He says, "Therefore consider the members of your earthly body as dead to immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and greed, which amounts to idolatry. For it is on account of these things that the wrath of God will come, and in them you also once walked when you were living in them, but now you also put them aside, all anger, wrath, malice, slander, and abusive speech from your mouth." These are the things that have entrapped you, have encumbered you, have placed a net over you that keep you from following Christ the way that He wants you to follow Him. Lay those things aside. Christ calls us to give up those things that are keeping us from following Him. But not everything that we are asked to leave behind is necessarily something that we would look at as being sinful. Abraham was called to leave his home behind. He was not involved in sin or dishonoring God by living in Ur of the Chaldees, but God called him out of there to take him someplace better. Moses, when he was living in Midian and serving his father-in-law, tending the flocks, there was nothing wrong with what he was doing. And yet God appeared to him and called him out of that place to go and do something different, to do something greater. Think of the prophets. Think of the disciples. Many of them gave up everything, including even their lives, in order to follow God. Luke chapter 14, verse 25 and following says, "Now great multitudes were going along with him, and he turned and said to them, 'If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. However, whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which one of you, when he wants to build a tower, does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish it, all who observe it begin to ridicule him, saying, "This man began to build and was not able to finish." Or what king, when he sets out to meet another king in battle, will not first sit down and take counsel whether he is strong enough with 10,000 men to encounter the one coming against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and asks terms of peace. So therefore, no one of you can be my disciple who does not give up all his own possessions. Following Christ should cost us something. It should. If it has cost us nothing, then what is it worth? If it has cost us nothing, then he didn't call us out of anything. He didn't call us out of a life of sin. He didn't call us out of a life that was leading to destruction. Following Christ should cost us something. And if we haven't given up anything, then we need to check how we're doing as followers. Because our following may not be what it needs to be if it hasn't cost us anything. Our call to action today is to remind us of this. At the end of our following, there is a prize. Yes, he calls us and there is a price to it. Yes, we have to give things up and we have to give them up immediately. And it is an admission that our plans for ourselves are not what they should be, and there is a greater purpose, and he has that purpose for us. But at the end of it, there is a prize that awaits us that is far greater than anything else we could imagine, that is far beyond what we could plan for ourselves. Matthew 19, verses 27 and following, "Then Peter answered and said to him, 'Behold, we have left everything and followed you. What then will there be for us?' Jesus said to them, 'Truly I say to you that you who have followed me, in the regeneration when the Son of Man will sit on his glorious throne, you also shall sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or children or farms for my name's sake shall receive many times as much and shall inherit eternal life.'" See, there is a price, but there is a prize. And the prize that is promised to us at the end is worth far more than the price that we are asked to pay. So this morning, if you want to receive the prize, it's there. It has been promised. It has been guaranteed. All we have to do is follow. And we can be sure that where he leads us to, that prize is at the end. That prize is what awaits us. If you have any need this morning that we can help you with, would you come while we stand and sing?